A plant-based chain is filed for bankruptcy. Is it time to put this whole plant-based meat thing to rest for good? Hello, this is Jonathan Mays, Editor-in-Chief of Restaurant Business, and welcome to The Week in Restaurants, our weekly look at the week that was in the restaurant industry. I am here once again with Executive Editor Lisa Jennings. The upscale chain Planta has filed for bankruptcy. We will talk about that and what it means, if anything, for the whole plant-based meat trend. Lisa got an inside look at Wingstop, and I will demand some answers about that particular visit. Cava's sales continue to grow, and Lisa's going to provide me some thoughts on some chicken fingers. Later on Tech Check, Joe Guszkowski talks super apps, and we will talk about the upcoming National Restaurant Show. But first, Lisa Jennings, tell me about Wingstop.
Wingstop. So they invited a few people down to see their new smart kitchen system, which is now in more than 400 restaurants, all the corporate restaurants, and then some of the franchisees have signed in. They're going to have it in the entire system by the end of the year, so another 2,000 to go. They wanted people to see what this was, and the word game changer was said by everyone involved. I mean, this is really something they want people to understand what a difference it's going to make in their business. So, Wingstop, you've probably heard, has done kind of pretty well. First quarter, they had a little bit of a rough sales decline, but for the most part, Wingstop has been one of those brands that has really stood out in terms of how it's grown its same-store sales. And they've done that largely with a system that ran on paper tickets. I mean, we're talking about those little paper chits that you'd stick in the thing and they would fall in the fryer and fall behind things. And they've done pretty well with that. But now this new system is digitizing in a way that a lot of restaurant chains have already done. So, I mean, this is the system itself is not particularly innovative, except that it's using AI machine learning to make forecasts in terms of, how much chicken needs to be cooked at specific times. And everything is very visual, graphic, and almost, they call it gamified, in that, all the workers, you can learn how to do this in one shift. Pictures come up that show what to make, when to make it at each station. They can just swipe it and move it along the process. And it's very efficient. And there's a screen at the counter so customers can see how their order is progressing. So the main headline of this is that it's cutting their speed of service in half. So you want lunch, you want to get a Wingstop chicken sandwich, you go online to order it and it says 20 minutes, it'll take to get to you, and see, well, I won't get a sandwich, I'll get something else. With this new system, now that's cut in half. So now your order comes up and it's a 10-minute promise of delivery. And now you're going to order that chicken sandwich at lunch and those new chicken tenders that they just rolled out. And it really this will make a huge difference, in terms of the throughput of getting a meal into people's hands. And they want people to understand that this is what a game changer this is going to be. So that's why we kept hearing about it. And so that's what we were there to try. Also, I tried the new Mexican spice chicken tenders, which are delicious.
So they're getting into the present. So is that what you're saying?
Present? Yeah, but if you think about it, so that their goal is to get to average unit volumes of 4 million, and 10% of their system is already there. So I feel like if it goes as described, is going to what Michael Skipworth, the CEO, said is essentially there's somewhat of an investment for franchisees, but they're scrambling to get this. But the return on the investment now is 2 years, for opening a unit, and adding this new system does not change that. So basically, the speed that it will bring to the business, it doesn't add any cost to that return on investment, if that makes sense. So
right,
I didn't explain that.
Do they have a strategy for franchisees to get this?
Well, they've got they're rolling it out market by market. So it's something that is there's a line, and they tell me that people are scrambling to get in top of the line. So. They want it. They're desperate to get to it because it really will change. It makes it so much better for team members, to operate. Literally, not having to deal with the little paper things that were printed out that sometimes the toner worked and you could, read the order and sometimes you couldn't. I'm sure everybody will remember what that was like. So that's why I was at Wingstop.
What was your impression of headquarters?
Oh, it's a lovely building. Yeah, it's a really nice headquarters in, I don't know Dallas well enough. Uptown, I think it's the Uptown neighborhood. Yeah. So it was really nice to be there and to see these things in action. And their test kitchen is lovely. And yeah, it was really nice of them to invite us in.
So they want to get their average unit volumes to 4 million by when?
I don't think he's given a timeline for that,
Yeah,
but
that's good because their average unit volume is only 2.1 million. They don't, so the 4 million seems like that's, I mean, yeah, sure, they can get to that. That will take a bit.
well, I mean, this system seems like it's going to help. Definitely will get them there. So we'll see.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm all in favor of boosting unit volumes, especially for a franchise brand, and all but 50 of Wingstop's locations are corporate or are franchisee run, and so that matters. And I think that the interesting thing about that, Lisa, is that we do see a lot of restaurants right now really, really focused on operations. Popeyes is also working on kitchen upgrades. We got Starbucks focused heavily on operations. Burger King focused heavily on operations. I think there is a broad-based realization across the restaurant universe. McDonald's, it has one. There's a broad-based realization that restaurants need to operate well. The industry is entirely too competitive, and you need to have really good operations. And sometimes that means new technology in the back of the house. A lot of times it means training. It means, just upgrading your standards, inspections, things of that nature. But we do see a lot of that. So to me, it's good to see a brand like Wingstop, which, they could, after the year that they had last year, which almost 40% sales growth, which is insane for a brand that big. They could have, I mean, they could have just said, well, we're going to continue to do more of the same and not invest behind it. So, but you have, if you're going to get unit volumes, by the way, from 2.1 to 4 million, you've got work to do.
Well, they're on it. But speaking of 40% same store sales increases, can we talk about Cava?
Sure.
So Cava, we'll know by the time this airs, had a pretty great first quarter. Everyone else was seeing some pullback, and Cava was up over nearly 11% in same store sales, and 7.5% of that was traffic. And they're not seeing really their folks pulling back at all. Their guests, not any income level, not particularly any geographic region, even DC, which has been Dojified. They're not really seeing customers pull back. So Cava's really now the standout, and they're going to be lapping big numbers just as Wingstop was too. But for the first quarter, I think they're over 40% in the 3-year same store sales increase, which is, pretty fabulous.
Right. Why do you think their sales have gone so well?
The people are they love the flavors, the Mediterranean flavors. These pita chips are, I have to say, I love them too. They're kind of addicting. They've got a new spicy one. They just rolled out the harissa flavored one that did really well. It's just one of those brands that people are really into right now. And, Brett Schulman, the CEO, talks about how it's a brand that really does focus on human connections. They're trying to make their dining room softer. There's a lot more dine-in. I think there's 65%, something like that, dine-in, which is unusual for fast casual. It's even though he's making the brand accessible through all channels. So he says, if you're in a hurry, you're running errands, you need to just run through a drive-through, order digitally, you can do that with Cava. But if you also are just meeting a friend and you want to sit down and have a nice lunch with somebody, it's available for that too. And it works, where a lot of brands are less flexible that way. So I don't know, people they love it. They love their Cava. They're going to be lapping some pretty high numbers this year. So later in the year, we'll see, if this continues, but at least in terms of the consumer behavior, they are not reporting pullback.
Well, I mean, the relative pullback. I mean, you got to remember that they're the numbers that they're producing are less than what they had produced before.
Right.
They're coming off 21% same store sales increase, 21%
in the fourth quarter. Yeah.
I mean, these numbers, in reality, their first quarter numbers from a year ago were actually relatively easy comparisons for them.
Right.
2.3% a year ago.
Right. That's
what I mean. Look at these. Listen to these numbers, Lisa. I'm going to go back. Let's see the numbers that we have for them. So they went public, and then they did 14.8 28.4, 18.2, 14.1, 11.4, then 2.3. And you're like, okay, that's it. Here comes the slowdown. No, 14.4, 21, 21.2. And then whatever they did in the first quarter, something is working. They're getting a lot of attention. They're through from the restaurant industry. People are really looking at what they do, what they're doing, and of course, trying to copy it, because that's what a certain segment of this industry does. Is they see somebody successful and they're like, okay, we're going to jump on that bandwagon. And so something is definitely working. It's probably the most pleasant thing for me is the fact that it's figuring out. Here we finally have a Mediterranean chain that's figuring things out, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, since I started covering the business like 20 years ago, Lisa, I have heard almost constantly that Mediterranean is going to be the next big thing. And the restaurant graveyard is filled with failed Mediterranean concepts. And to see somebody sort of crack the code makes some sense.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. They were smart in the beginning because the way they grew, with the acquisition of Zoe's Kitchen, that opened up, quite a bit of real estate that they were able to convert. So that was a really smart move and investment on their part. Secondly, they have their sauces and their dips all done in, this is a vertical operation. So they have their own manufacturing centers that are supplying for the CPG and for the restaurants. It took a lot of complexity out of the whole operation. So you have all these great flavors that are coming in that they are producing themselves, and can control, which just leaves, the raw ingredients that they're cooking, the cooking that's done in the units. It's simplified the whole thing. And so I think those were two really smart moves for this brand that have helped kind of move it along this trajectory. And they were now operationally able to do what they're doing, which is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, they are as hot a restaurant chain as we have right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd agree. Well, Jonathan, we're going into the NRA show this week, which is usually all about plant-based foods, but we had some bad news this week from one plant-based brand.
Yeah, Planta. Planta, I think a 19 unit concept based in Miami, filed for bankruptcy and is looking for a buyer. This is an interesting one, actually. They started out in 2016. They've got an upscale, basically plant-based, mostly Asian-inspired concept, and was by all means successful in the early days. Hit the pandemic, and then started opening a bunch of restaurants. And they opened restaurants they got a few in Florida. They've got some in Atlanta. They've got up the East Coast, up to New York. Then they got one in Chicago. They got a couple in Toronto and all the way to Los Angeles. They don't have a lot of secured debt. Usually in these bankruptcy filings, Lisa, there's secured debt and leases. They don't have secured debt. They needed some rescue cash last year, so they did a debt. They took out a convertible note, which basically gives the note holder the right to convert that to equity, to take some ownership if it doesn't get paid in time. But they're basically looking for a buyer. Clearly grew way too fast for what they are, and just don't generate the sales to be able to justify the number of locations and even actually pay rent on time. So they're going to be looking for a buyer. The bigger issue really here, and we've seen a number of these bankruptcies, usually these bankruptcies are fueled by, again, a weak capital structure. You don't see a company that new file for bankruptcy that fast. My big concern really, Lisa, frankly, is what this says about the plant-based meat thing. And I think its course is run. I don't think there's any question about it. And we are going to the show, and I guarantee you there's going to be a ton of plant-based meat vendors there.
Yeah.
And it is, it's a fine product. I have, I've had it in innumerable formats over the years, but the broad consumer is not ready for it. And we've seen, if you look at Beyond Meat numbers, Beyond Meat sales numbers just fell off a cliff last quarter, and they blamed it on weak food service sales, weak food service demand. You see, I think it was the Kevin Hart concept closed real fast.
Right. Hard House.
Yeah, Hart House. All these, for a while. I mean, every single major restaurant chain was trying to do plant-based meat in some form or fashion. All of them, except I think Burger King, and I don't even think Burger King is focused from a marketing standpoint, has pulled back, and White Castle. Nobody's really marketing this stuff.
Yeah.
There was the McDonald's. McDonald's, I can tell you, really, really wanted to serve the McPlant in the United States. They wanted to introduce McPlant in the U.S. as their plant-based meat. Didn't take. Just didn't take. They did a big test. The executives were very eager for it to work, and nothing. And that's my bigger issue. I mean, the McPlant bankruptcy, or the Planta bankruptcy, not the McPlant. The Planta bankruptcy was one thing, but it's the plant-based meat thing. I mean, do you have what do you think?
Well, the thing that's sort of interesting about this, and I'm going to be writing about this probably later, but there is a brand here that it's called Mr. Charlie's, and it's plant-based, and it's very similar looking to McDonald's. I mean, they're jokingly, very, playfully kind of creating it like a mock McDonald's. In fact, their burger tastes exactly like a McDonald's burger, but it's plant-based. And Mike Tyson is involved in it as an investor, I think, and they are franchising it now. And there's actually a franchisee about to open a whole bunch of them in Arizona, which is kind of interesting. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. It's a fun brand, though. I have to say, the food is pretty good. But to your point, we've seen a lot of plant-based concepts fall by the side of the road and drop out of the game. So we'll see. I mean, we'll see.
I really hope the franchisee that is investing in a brand like that and is going to open a bunch of them in Arizona has really damn well know what he's doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
No. I mean, that is I mean, how many locations do they have open now?
I think they have 3 or 4, something like that.
And how long has it been around?
It's been around, I want to say since the pandemic. I think it opened around that time. So it's been in LA for a while. And then they have one in San Francisco. They have a couple, I think, elsewhere. But yeah.
No, I just don't think the demand is there. And if you're going to do this, it has to be, the concept has to stand on its own. And look, I talked to some, like we have a local restaurant in Minneapolis. It's called Francis, and it's a wonderful place. And my wife and I go with regularity, and it's fine. So it's not like I'm anti-plant-based. On occasion, I certainly, if the concept if it's a fun concept that stands on its own, sure. It's just a niche product. It's not nearly the biggest issue that I think I had with the whole plant-based meat thing is that they compared it to the popularity of sort of plant-based milk. And I never thought that was the right comparison, and the popularity of plant-based milk is not because, is not really because consumers are concerned about the environment or because they just feel like, cow's milk is too much. It's largely because there's a certain segment of the population that can't handle milk. And lactose intolerance is actually a really significant issue. There's a lot of reasons why people drink plant-based milk. I mean, there are some people that just feel it's healthier and whatnot, yada, yada, yada. But that doesn't translate into burgers. It's a different thing.
Yeah.
And so that's my sense of it. The plant-based meat is not necessarily any healthier for you. It is usually what it gains in not having meat, it loses in essentially being lab created, which people don't necessarily like and stuff like that.
Right.
And I just don't think that the consumer is quite ready for it. There's a lot of skepticism about it. So anything to me has to prove it. But anyway, good luck to the franchisee of that brand. Somebody's going to get a hold of this and send this one out left and right. Anyway, I want to ask you about this. Lisa, speaking of McDonald's menu items, I hear you tried some chicken strips.
Yeah. Sorry, Jonathan. But
why are you apologizing to me? What do I care?
okay, all right. But so I had just come from Wingstop's test kitchen, where I had probably the best chicken tenders that they could possibly produce, made by their corporate chef, and they were, very good. What I would definitely order those anytime. But I was still hungry, so I went to the airport, found a McDonald's, and I wanted to try the McCrispy strips. So I ordered McCrispy strips and the chili sauce that they have, I think, which is one of the new ones, right? That's one of the new ones. Chili, I've forgotten the name. Chili glaze, maybe.
Creamy chili,
something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sorry, McDonald's, that was not a good contender.
Sauce was good.
Sauce was tasty. Yeah.
Tasty.
It was in the airport. It was not at all.
Never fully judge a restaurant company's products based on what you try in the airport.
Right. So I'll give it another shot, but I have to say it really did not stand out in my mind as a chicken strip in this very crowded chicken strip world. That's not the one I'm going to order. But
my view on it, frankly, Lisa, so first off, I have to say that your standards generally are really high.
Is that wrong? That's so wrong?
Except you didn't really like Raising Cane's all that much.
Well,
Raising Cane's, I have
changed my mind about Raising Cane's.
Absolutely phenomenal chicken.
Yes, yeah.
Is an absolutely phenomenal chicken.
Yeah.
My concern
they won me over.
Yeah, my concern on the McDonald's chicken, and I tried it. It was roughly what I expected. Now the new sauce is really good, and I also think the real potential for McDonald's as a business is snack wraps. That's what this is going to be used for. They're going to use it for snack wraps. My concern, if I'm McDonald's or if I'm McDonald's operator, and from what I understand, it's selling well, it's doing fine right now, based on what I've heard. My concern on balance is the expectations of the consumer today are much higher.
Right.
The U.S. consumer is not going to tolerate a substandard chicken product, even from McDonald's, unless it's, if it's cheap. Now, and maybe it's a price thing. Maybe what their plan is that this is going to be, they can call it a better value chicken strip versus what you get elsewhere. And maybe that's the benefit. And that very well might be it. But, I think that one of the big lessons that we learned from the chicken sandwich thing is that the consumers just really, really like high quality stuff. And if they perceive, given the amount of competition there is in the chicken tender market in particular, and everybody's got chicken tenders, and a lot of them are very, very, very good. There is a lot of really good chicken products in the market right now.
Yeah.
So that's my concern. It's not necessarily meeting expectations. Again, maybe this is something they could say, hey, look, you can get chicken tenders for a lot cheaper than you can go get it at Raising Cane's, or wherever. But we'll see.
Yeah.
Now, coming up in the podcast, Joe Guszkowski is going to talk about super apps, and we will talk about the upcoming National Restaurant Show. But first, whatever ad Spoons inserts into the podcast next.
Keep up with what's happening in the restaurant industry with Restaurant Daily.
I'm NRN Managing Editor Leanne Zinsmeister.
I'm RB Managing Editor Heather Lally.
We bring you a specific look of what's happening in the restaurant world from brands like McDonald's, single unit mom and pop shops, and hot button issues like inflation, tariffs, and more.
Start your day right with the Restaurant Daily podcast every weekday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts.
And be sure to subscribe to never miss an episode.
Hello and welcome to Tech Check, where I, Joe Guszkowski, talk really fast about one big topic in restaurant tech. This week, welcome to the super app era. Uber Eats this week said that it will soon offer restaurant reservations on its app through a partnership with OpenTable. That followed the news last week that DoorDash is acquiring 7 Rooms, which is a reservations provider. The message is clear. The two delivery giants want to do far more than just delivery. They want to be customers' one-stop shop for all things food. They're starting to look a lot like super apps, or single apps that offer a number of different services. These apps are common in Asia, where platforms like WeChat combine messaging with shopping and delivery. The rise of such apps in the US could change the landscape for services like food delivery by making customers more loyal to one app over others. We're seeing the early stages of this now at DoorDash, Uber Eats, and also Wonder, the quote super app for mealtime being developed by Mark Laurie. They're all looking to connect customers with more meal occasions, including now dining out. So what's next? Hotels, flights? How about movie tickets or sporting events? Whatever it is, I don't think we've seen the last of what these apps will ultimately become.
All right, Lisa, have you heard of the National Restaurant Show?
I'm planning on being there, Jonathan. I'm looking
Really?
forward to seeing you there.
Am I? Yeah, I guess we'll both be there. Yeah, we have a gigantic booth. What are you looking forward to?
Well, I have to admit, I just love wandering the halls and tasting, everything from Fruit Loops Slurpees to kelp stuff on crackers to, I go through and I eat things, which I think is really fun. And then you meet lots of people, you run into lots of folks and just end up chatting with, it's like a giant party where you can just graze your way through. It really is. This event is a lot of fun. I have to admit, it's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun.
It is a fair bit of work, but yeah, it's definitely a lot of fun. I'm actually looking forward to our booth.
Yeah.
We have a very big podcast set up this year with multiple stations where multiple podcasts and videos are going to be recorded. The story I always tell is a few years ago, restaurant business did not have a booth at the show. And we, just at the time, our parent company, Winsight at the time, had made a special agreement with the National Restaurant Association at the time. And we were on our way to buying the show. And so we're like, can we have a booth of some sort? We asked marketing. Well, they couldn't produce a booth in the short amount of time that we asked for one. We need some place to record podcasts. We got basically a folding table and like a small handful of chairs. And it was right behind, if you know where the association's booth. So it was behind the association's booth in the North Hall, and then right in front of the stairs, the escalators to go down to the first floor. And we only decorated it with a bunch of print editions of Restaurant Business, which we did at the time. And I was sitting there stuck recording podcasts with my Yeti microphone.
All by yourself.
Well, I mean, some other people would join us essentially, and everybody abandoned. I was only at the show for a couple of days, and I spent almost the entire time at that booth to largely protect it, because people would sit there. And what would happen is everybody would ask me where the bathroom was. And then everybody would ask me where the bathroom was. And then I left, and nobody manned it after I left. So we essentially lost it. Essentially, if nobody's there and you have a table, people will sit at it and put their garbage on it. And that's exactly what happened. The worst part about it is I think I recorded 3 or 4 podcasts, all of them completely unusable, because a Yeti microphone is not that, a Yeti microphone is good if you're in an enclosed location. But I did, like Don Fox, the former CEO of Firehouse Subs, I did what I thought were really good podcasts at the time. This is very early. And so I did all of that for roughly nothing. And now we got a fancy podcast set up and somebody that actually knows how to do podcasts called Spoons. And so we've come a long way.
I would encourage everyone to walk up to Jonathan at this fancy booth and ask him where the bathroom is.
If anybody does, they get points for listening to this podcast for that long. And that should do it for the week in restaurants, which was edited, as always, by Spoons. Artwork by Nico Hines. You may find this in other episodes of the podcast. on our website at www.restaurantbusinessonline.com. But please subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. I'm Jonathan Mays, your host and the editor-in-chief of Restaurant Business for Lisa Jennings. Thank you for listening.